There's a secret ingredient for growing really good quality tomatoes. I'm not sure I've ever mentioned it before. So pretty much everybody that gardens or farms knows about the macronutrients and understands about the three that come to mind: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But I recently got a soil or a water test back, I can't remember which, and it talked about the 5 macronutrients. And this was kind of news to me. Still learning every day, or at least I try to. I did not realize that magnesium and calcium are also macronutrients. So macro, that means those are the 5 most important ones. I have been using Epsom salt on my tomatoes for years, even back when I was just gardening, but I didn't quite understand the major importance of it until recent years. And since I've started running it in sufficient quantity through the drip irrigation, I have seen huge gains in my tomato crops. The biggest gains that I've seen and the biggest improvements in quality have been with calcium nitrate. Well, really, calcium nitrate, potassium nitrate, and magnesium sulfate. You're not going to go wrong if you run the 3 of these in rotation, irrigation after irrigation cycle throughout the season. I mean, there comes a point of diminishing returns. You can certainly overdo it, but I run about 15 pounds of magnesium sulfate to the acre about every other week. I try to, early on in the crop, run my calcium nitrate every other week, alternating, maybe more frequently, but at least every other week alternating with my potassium nitrate. And when I run calcium nitrate, I try to follow it up with Epsom salt. I can't fully explain the chemistry to you, but it's something about the calcium nitrate does something to make the magnesium less available. So you'll really benefit by, you're not supposed to run them at the same time, but you'll really benefit by chasing your calcium nitrate with Epsom salt. So that's what I'm getting ready to do today. I've already got my 15 pounds for my acre of tomatoes weighed out. And magnesium sulfate is not only good for tomatoes. I mean, it makes a big difference in strawberries and lots of other things as well. So I'm not sure if I talked about this in a recent video or not, but I was having some issues with this big Mozzie injector not wanting to siphon if I was irrigating too small of a field. There was just not enough water volume running through the injector to create a vacuum. So I was back and forth on different solutions to the problem, and what I came up with is I put 2 of these PVC connectors, and I built a whole nother setup with a small Mozzie. So I can take this large Mozzie injector off, put the little Mozzie on. If I need to run, say, calcium nitrate or coragen on our 1/4 acre of sweet corn, then I can do that. If I, like now, I'm fixing to go back, and there's about 1 1/4 acres in this block of tomatoes, eggplant, and squash, and so I've gone back to the bigger injector so that I can inject much faster and more efficiently without having as many issues. The little one's bad about stopping up, as I mentioned before. this one I can run about 50 gallons an hour without even really trying. So if I'm running potassium nitrate, that's really handy, because you're going to have a hard time dissolving 50 pounds in 50 gallons. So if you can't run it fairly quickly, you'll have stuff floating off down the hill before you get all your potassium nitrate dissolved and ran. So that's where the larger injector really comes in handy. So basically what we're going to try to do here is, and I know I've shown this before, but we're going to divert the water by way of turning this gate valve down. We're going to send water up this pipe through the mozzie by the venturi, which is going to siphon the Epsom salt water out of this barrel and send it down here and out to the field, but after it goes through the sand filters, because we don't want to stop up our drip tape. So you will hear when it starts to pull a vacuum. And there comes the liquid. You can see it's picking up a little bit of salt that didn't dissolve. That's okay, because it's still got to go into the sand filters where it'll sit and dissolve as the water is running through it. I do like, the thing that I really like about the little mozzie is I have a flow meter. And these are a little bit pricey depending on where you get them, but this one I think came from Rainflow and was fairly reasonable. Still pricey for what it is, but it's just a little metal ball that floats. And it, with the small mozzie, it will tell you the gallons per minute that you're injecting, or gallons per hour rather. The big one, obviously, it has too big of a hose to run the flow meter with. I could buy another one, but I'm not going to spend $75 just to have a big flow meter. I kind of gauge my flow by how fast it's running, and also that coupled with the field pressure. As long as I've got decent field pressure, then I'm getting enough suction, then I'm happy with it. And we're pretty solid on the field pressure here. I've got a gauge over here that I can check as well. As long as we're off the peg on that gauge, I'm not worried about it, because this field is all downhill from here. Now if this is your first time learning about magnesium sulfate as a fertilizer, don't go to Walmart and buy it 10 pounds at a time. You'll go broke trying to feed your tomatoes like that, unless you're feeding 15 of them in a garden. That's great. But if you've got this many tomatoes, that's not going to be cost effective. Your local chemical dealer sells this, and that's something that I just learned a couple years ago. I buy it by the 50-pound bag from pretty much all of my chemical and fertilizer houses. I'll keep it in stock. We're getting on up in the season a little bit. We're on the verge of picking everything here pretty soon. I recently made a video about spraying all of these row middles with Liberty, and it did a really good job of cleaning up. As you can tell, it pretty well smoked all this grass and all the weeds. I'm starting to have some stuff coming back, but it's not really that it's coming back necessarily. It's new stuff is sprouting up. That Liberty seemed to really do a good job. Only thing I've seen that it has not knocked in the head is this dang nutsedge, and I'm not sure if there is anything that will kill nutsedge. At least that's the way it seems. But it's some of it, I mean, it turned it pretty yellow, but it has definitely not killed it dead. For the first part of June, I am very pleased with the progress of our tomatoes. We've got a fruit cluster sizing up on just about every plant, and some of them the second cluster is starting to size up. And like here, we got this cluster that's looking really good. This cluster is, for some reason, not all of it got pollinated, and this one is coming along too. The guys just came through today and put another set of strings on some of these tomatoes. As you can see, we're up to 3 strings on a big part of the field. While we're walking crop, I will take you down here and show you my sweet corn on plastic mulch. It is on the verge of tasseling. Just gave it some potassium nitrate last night, which hopefully is going to really get it going. Everything's coming along pretty nice. These right here are October beans. This is a later planting of cucumbers that seems to be coming up fairly well. This is some squash that is about to start putting on squash and zucchini. Here is squash and zucchini we've been picking for a week or so. We've got okra that is completely eat up with weeds. I really hate growing okra. Pretty sure we don't make any money on it, but it's one of those things that people come from all over to get from us, and they buy other things while they're at it. These are pink eye purple hull peas, which are really looking good. I had some issue with them early on. They were kind of wrinkling up. It's almost like some herbicide damage. I don't think so, because it didn't really seem to slow them down. But and when I say herbicide damage, I mean like some dicamba drift from somebody spraying soybeans. But I don't think so. The way they grew right out of it, I'm not sure what it was, but they're looking really nice. Next, we've got a pretty good sized block of white half runners. These are Jackson white half runners. No, they're not. These are volunteer white half runners. Used to grow Jackson, started growing volunteer. They'll be to the top of the stick very soon, and as soon as they get there, they'll be putting on pods. This is our later planting of sweet corn on bare dirt. And looky here, 1st of June, tassels hanging out the top of sweet corn on green plastic. I don't think there was really any advantage of green over black, but this sweet corn is going to be probably the earliest we've ever had sweet corn. I don't know, I might have to look at some records and make a decision on whether I have to look back at when we first picked sweet corn last year versus when I planted it versus when we planted this and when we pick it, to determine the green plastic deal. This sweet corn just got super kicker, or basically urea, spread on it. I can see some places where it's burnt it a little bit, where I had some grains fall down in the corn, but it'll grow right out of that without a lot of issue. And one more thing, it's a little bit weedy, but these are our strike snap beans. Check these things out. Yes. Yes, sir. Strike snap beans are hard to beat. You can make money with snap beans hand picking them when you can pick them by the fistful. These are not quite ready to pick yet. And a few videos back I mentioned y'all about having some issue with some herbicide damage. And that was my fault. I had a little Roundup drift when I was spraying these row middles. So my stand count is really pitiful. Normally, when they're planted as thick as they should be, these strike snap beans, you won't be able to see the plastic from the bush. And all the way up the row looks like this, just fistfuls of beans. And it's usually good for us to have that many, because early on, when we first put out there on Facebook that we've got snap beans, it's almost like when we first put out there that we've got strawberries. The parking lot fills up. So it's a pretty good thing to be able to pick 4 or 5 boxes of green beans off of each row. I got one more thing I'm going to show y'all before I let you go. I've got some no-till beans and peas coming along that are looking okay. Not great, but okay. These are peas. Germination was fair on those. You can see down there in the bin they get a little sporadic, which has really got me scratching my head, because we had a water leak and that part of the field was really wet right after I planted these. So I'm not sure why the peas didn't come up good where it was wet. The beans were actually slower to come up there too, so it's really kind of puzzling. I got some weeds in here, but I've got some Basagran that I'm fixing to spray over it to knock all these weeds in the head. Looks like I'm going to have to put some Volunteer in with it because I got some crabgrass issues. But I've got 8 rows of half runners coming along here, and then 8 rows of snaps. And these are strike snap beans as well. They're not going to yield the same, but they are just as happy growing no-till as they are on plastic mulch, the Volunteer and the strike. Get these sprayed. I just got them fertilized. As expensive as fertilizer is and as cheap as bean seeds are, this may seem a little crazy to you, but I planted these and I waited to see how good they were going to come up before I fertilized them, because I didn't want to waste the fertilizer until the beans got up, because they're not really going to utilize it until they get a little bit of height to them and it rains it in really good. So these just got fertilized, and I get the weeds sprayed out of them, they should really take off. But anyway, I appreciate you guys watching. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments. I try to get to all of them. And I have reached the point of the season where it seems like all that I do is spray and water. Run fertilizer through the water, spray again, water. It's like a vicious cycle, Groundhog Day. So I'm trying to come up with some new ideas for some fresh content. If there's something that y'all want to see, something that you got questions on that I've never really covered, by all means, please drop it in the comments, and I would love to hear y'all's suggestions for new content. And I will see y'all on the next one.